Can you beat Undertale's True Pacifist route without acting? Hey there guys, NovemberJoy here, and welcome to the Reptile Rumble. I was originally hoping for this to be an April Fool's Day video, but I missed that deadline by a lot. This video turned out to be way more work than I thought, but here we are. One of Undertale's defining features is the different ways you can complete fights. You can murder everything you see, run away, beat them up until they beg for mercy, or use the act command to talk and appease your way out of fights. What happens though if you're not allowed to act? If all you can do is spare, flee, or use items to get out of fights without violence? Do we have any chance at all? Can you beat Undertale's True Pacifist route without acting? The rules for this one are very simple. We're just not allowed to use the act command for any reason. We are allowed to use glitches or exploits just as long as we can still reach the end of the True Pacifist route. Sadly, I don't really have a good optional challenge for this one. We're kinda limited enough as it is, being locked out of a pacifist run's main tool for pacifying enemies. With the rules out of the way, let's get into the run. The Ruins starts about as expected, with us running away. We'll be fleeing from most fights, simply because they're really not worth bothering with. Without being able to act, we can't pacify most enemies normally. While we can fight enemies and spare them once their HP drops below a certain point, it's tricky to do without accidentally killing them, and we don't need the money. We'll get enough of being a terrible person in this run anyway. Napsterbloke won't let us pass, so we have no choice but to attack. Good thing we can't kill ghosts. Toriel, however, is no obstacle in this run. Acting doesn't work in the first place, so we just spare her the standard way. So far so good? Next up, we're in Snowden. As usual, Snowden doesn't pose much of a challenge. There are forced fights with the dog unit, but they can all be spared by using the stick from our item menu. Papyrus is a similar deal. All we have to do is survive to the end of his fight, and he'll spare us without any acting required. The greatest tragedy is that we can't flirt with him. Truly the most difficult part of the challenge. Waterfall actually doesn't pose much of a threat. It tries to throw more fights at us that we can't skip, but neither of them are majorly challenging. Mad Dummy is another fight where acting doesn't work anyway. And as for Undyne, running away is already our primary strategy. Gotta say, these fights felt like a breeze in comparison to how tough they were in the no dodging challenge. Things might finally heat up once we reach Hotland, with the sexy rectangle himself hassling us along the way. His quiz show definitely isn't a problem for this challenge, though. The only thing in the act menu is Cry, and that's against both Mettaton's rules and my rules. We do find our first major obstacle later in Hotland, though. Royal Guards 1 and 2. This is a fight where we have to act to bring the two lovers out of the closet, and there is no easy way past. How are we gonna get past, then? Well, I got this punch card for a reason. Time to explain how this one little card breaks the entire game. Here's how the punch card glitch works. When you open it, it tells the game that you're in a cutscene, and closing it tells the game you're no longer in a cutscene. When you walk, you can open the menu at the same time you move, and the game won't start any cutscenes while you have the menu open because that would just be weird. Then, use the punch card from your inventory to pull it up. If you did it right, you should see the text box pop up telling you to stop while the punch card's on screen. Then, we can close the punch card to tell the game we're no longer in a cutscene, and presto, we can walk around and ignore the people talking to us. We almost get tripped up by Alphys calling us multiple times, but we managed to get out of there just in time before they realize we're gone. Success! Now that we're past there, we learn a crucial fact about bombs. We can defuse them by punching them. Is this standard practice for bomb disposal crews? Probably not, but it doesn't stop it from working. However, after a relatively easy fight with Muffet, where we just wait until the telegram arrives and she spares us, we find out that Mettaton has been watching and learning our weaknesses. We don't have any trouble with standing there while he sings at us, or with solving the maze and somehow failing anyway, but what we do have trouble with is this. Yeah, that's not happening. You wanna know how I know Mettaton set this up on purpose? Because he's taunting us about the one thing we can't do. He points out, truthfully, that I wouldn't dare press that act command. There's just no way to get past him in the fight, and he won't even kill us off, stopping his attack right when we're on the brink of death. Clearly, he's found our weakness, and he intends to stand here, blocking our way until the end of time. Too bad we've still got the punch card on our side. Just activate it right as you trigger the musical, and you can walk right by since the electric barriers won't have spawned yet. However, we're not in the clear. Some scenes in this game give you control, but won't let you open your menu, and the musical is one of them, so our menu is now permanently disabled, unless I can use an event to re-enable it. Thankfully, the Undyne date that I haven't done yet is one of them. You might be tempted to immediately use the elevator to go do that, but that's a trap. Because we glitched past the opera scene, our story progress is still from before the opera scene, so we'll lose access to Right Floor 3 if we take the elevator now. Also, trying to head down into the colored tile room causes us to fall at the opposite end like usual, so don't do that. We actually have to head just far enough into the core to make this cutscene play and update our story progress. Then we can head back and do the Undyne date. Nothing major happens on the Undyne date, other than us punching her with the regular fight command and still only dealing 1 damage because we're just such a good kid. Once we're done with that, we proceed forward through the core the quick way by solving the Sage's path and running from everything. We meet up with Mettaton once again, and once again, we have a problem. His one last trick is that we have to use the act menu to make him turn around. Now, you can turn him around before the fight even starts, but that only works if you've turned him around at least once in the current playthrough or in a past one. So we have to punch card past him again. It's kinda painful, not gonna lie, because I really wanted to prove him wrong after he called me weak. One relatively normal Asgore fight later, we arrive at Omega Flowey, and this is where the run gets interesting and a bit of a gray area shows up. Do the act buttons in this fight count as act buttons for our purposes? Let's see. First, you could skip this fight entirely if you have previous save data. Second, you could not count these because they don't act the same way normal act buttons act. These are both valid reasons to not count these act buttons. However, whether we count them or not, we can still try to theorize the minimum number of act presses necessary to complete this fight. You see, Omega Flowey actually has a finite amount of HP even before you call out to all 6 souls to drop his defense. It would be incredibly slow and hard, but you can whittle down all 6,000 HP without actually calling all 6 souls because the phases repeat and fight buttons continue to show up. In our case, however, we wouldn't even be able to call out to 1 soul, so we'd have to chip away all his HP, 1 point at a time. And fight buttons don't even show up on every phase, so we'd literally have to survive over 9,000 consecutive attack phases. I hope you guys can understand why I didn't put too much time into testing that. Even if that theoretical strategy worked, we'd still have to press the act button once to call out to the souls and end the fight. So I'm just gonna say these act presses do not count, and we'll try our best with the rest of the True Pacifist route. Before we head into the True Lab though, we're gonna need a ton of prep. Don't worry, you'll see why soon enough. First things first, Mettaton was right. We are too weak. But how can we fix that? Well, Sans already told me all about how I gained love, but I didn't gain any love at the same time. But what if I gained love after I already gained love? That's right, it's time to do violence! We need to be very specific about how we do our violence though. Once we receive this phone call from Undyne, we're locked onto the True Pacifist route, so the game will no longer check if we've killed anyone to abort the route. And specifically in version 1.00, this phone call also mistakenly re-enables monster encounters in the core until we go and grab Undyne's letter. Both of these things combined mean that we can kill as much as we want inside the core. which, of course, is all 40 encounters. By the end of our little killing spree, we're at level 14. We've done so much killing, we actually have a kill count on our stats screen. That's something I was not used to seeing on a pacifist route. Now, we need a lot of cash, and I mean a lot of cash. Even killing 40 monsters in the core wasn't enough for what we need. The fastest way to grind cash is by buying cloudy glasses from Gerson and selling them to Temmie for a profit. We do have a little travel time, but the money we make is definitely worth it. I needed about 11,000 gold total to buy all the things I needed, and I got all that cash in about 30 minutes of grinding this way. As for what I needed, I sent Temmie to college, bought the Temmie armor for a high price, and I bought 8 legendary heroes. I mean, I may have killed at least a third of Hotland's entire population, but I sure bolstered the local economy. Okay, so I committed more mass murder than you can shake a bone at, and I spent more money than 99.9% of players ever get over the course of the game for... what exactly? To answer that, we need to get into the True Lab. Of course, that requires that we actually grab the letter and go through the Alpha Estate section, which doesn't have any challenges besides telling Undyne the painful truth. Once we're in, we can't get out, so it's important that we have everything before we enter. I definitely didn't lose an entire playthrough from forgetting necessary items. Why are you looking at me like that? The first amalgamate is Memory Head, and it's not possible without acting. We can't punch card past it because we have to interact with it to start the fight and pick up the key it leaves behind, and there aren't any items or anything to help us spare it another way. As a result, I was forced to use 2 acts to complete this fight. So, unfortunately, it is not possible to beat Undertale's True Pacifist route without acting. But let's see how far we can get while trying to minimize our act presses. Starting with these 2 on the counter now. With that out of the way, things open up a lot for us, and there's a few different amalgamates I can fight now. I went for Endogony first because it's entirely possible in this challenge. Endogony is a dog, or, well, multiple dogs. So we can spare immediately if we use the stick from our item menu. That's 1 more down. Unfortunately, Lemon Bread is next, and we need 3 acts to get past this one because we don't have any fancy techniques to use on it. If I were playing the Switch version, I could walk past because of bad hitboxes, but that won't work for us. The next one I went for was Snowdrake's mother, and you might already have an idea of what I'm about to do. Normally, you need to tell a couple of jokes to be able to spare her, and she leaves behind a key that we need to finish the True Lab, so what option do we have? Well, you know how most amalgamates don't take damage from attacks because they have too much determination? This one is different because she actually does take damage. However, she has an enormous amount of HP, and it regenerates before damage is calculated, so we have to deplete all of it in a single hit. That's what we did all that preparation for. We have 26 extra attack from the 13 levels we gained, plus 10 from the Burnt Pan, plus 10 from the Temmie armor, and plus 32 from eating all 8 of those legendary heroes we bought. That gives us a total attack power of 86, which is enormous by this game's standards. Even with that, though, we need 4 perfect hits in a row to deal enough damage. While I was trying this, I noticed her text was moving slightly to the left every time I hit her, until it was eventually drawing the text on top of her sprite. Has anyone else documented this bug? Well, whether they have or not, I eventually got the timing down, hit a perfect quadruple crit, and she died. We just killed an amalgamate. Turns out determination isn't so bulletproof after all. Yeah, we should just grab the key and move on before we realize what we just did. The last amalgamate that's left is Reaper Bird, and this one seems like bad news. We can't murder it, and there's no easy way to spare it. However, this one actually doesn't drop a key when defeated, so if we can find a way to skip it, it's not necessary. Skipping it seems pretty trivial at first by using the punch card and running as soon as you hear the encounter noise, but it's got some extra complications. Once we put the key in and exit the room, the encounter will immediately trigger because we're past the point where it's supposed to trigger. However, there is one thing we can do. Learn how to break the game even further with the punch card. When you use the punch card from the menu, you have exactly 1 frame where you can move if you're holding a direction down. If you touch a room transition during that time, you'll transition to the next room with the cutscene flag still active, soft-locked and unable to move. And more importantly, you'll be in a completely different spot than you're supposed to be. This happens because the game tries to figure out where you entered or exited from, and doing this causes confusion as to where and how you entered the room. So you'll be placed at the room's default spawn point, which is specifically set for each room. If you immediately close the punch card as the room is fading out and push another direction, you'll show up at the default point for the room and retain your mobility. As a result, if we can pull it off properly, the default point for this room is past the evil event trigger, and we never have to fight Reaper Bird at all. Okay, so we made it through the True Lab while only acting 5 times. Let's see what else is ahead. As Flowey's setup succeeds once again, I can only imagine Sans giving me the biggest stink eye upon realizing how high my love is. Hey, guys, I don't think I really need the help. I can take way more damage than that. Okay, do your thing then. Azrael Dreamer is mostly as expected for the first phase. We can't hope or dream, but we can do a great job of standing there and surviving his barrages of attacks, since we have both Temi armor and a huge amount of HP. Once we get past Hypergoner though, that's when the real trouble starts. Yep, Azrael's been studying our weaknesses as well, and his methods are way more efficient than Mettaton's ever were. Our soul is completely locked on the act command. No amount of pounding on the arrow keys will let us select anything else. We have to keep hitting the act command and struggling for 5 turns until we use our power to reshape our act button into a save button. I'm gonna say the save button doesn't count towards our act presses, because when we try to use it to save our friends, it turns right back into an act button, and even though I never once acted in front of a single one of these people, I still have to act to make them remember me. They must be thinking of a very different person. All in all, we need 3 for Undyne, 3 for Alphys. I used 4 for Sans and Papyrus, but that's because I didn't remember the most optimal way, so it's actually 3. And it's 1 for Toriel and Asgore, because using the pie speeds up the whole process of them remembering you. Once that's done, it's as simple as using our shiny, glowing save button on Azrael until he gives up the fight. With that, we can make our way out of the underground and officially say we completed Undertale's True Pacifist route, only using 20 act presses. While we may not have been able to meet our goal entirely, I still think we did pretty alright, since 15 of those came from the final fight with no reasonable way to avoid them. However, could we have done better? Well, I didn't want to put too much time in since this video is already very late as it is, but there is a way to improve this that I spent some time trying and failing to set up and get working. If you're extremely good with frame-perfect inputs, or using software like libtask to gain extra tool assistance, there are way more complex things you can do to break Undertale in half. One of those things is abusing persistence, a very complicated bug which only works on certain versions of the game. First, you need to use an overflow to get into a state where you have events layered on top of other events, so you can cancel the cutscene control lock and start moving during the event. Then you need to use your newfound freedom to exit the room at the exact same time the encounter starts, which is frame perfect. Then, when you die, you can head back, and the game will act as if you won the encounter. This lets you get past a lot of things, including every single amalgamate in the True Lab. If you're willing to set this up, it shaves off the 5 act presses the True Lab added onto the challenge. All in all, I consider this a mostly successful run. I went into this looking for a way to not only kill an amalgamate, as shown by QSV, but do it without save file editing, and find a way to make it useful, and I mostly succeeded. Sure, there are more optimal things I could have done, but I had fun, and I did enjoy breaking Undertale like this. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, and hopefully it wasn't too long of a wait. I'll see what I can do to make things more timely in the future with other projects. Spare a click on those cards to check out more challenges like this one, or other stuff you might like, and brutally destroy the subscribe button with a frying pan if you'd like to keep up with whatever crazy things I end up doing next. With that in mind, I'll see you guys next time on the Reptile Rumble.